My name is Carlos de la Garza. I am a producer, mixer, engineer. I work primarily in rock, alternative, indie. I've worked with bands like Paramore, Cold War Kids, Bad Religion, Best Coast, Cherry Glazer, Wolf Alice. This is my world. My typical day varies depending on what stage of the recording process I'm in. If it's a tracking day, usually I'll come in here, around 9 or 10 after the kids have gone to school, and I'll kind of set up for the day, whether it's tracking a vocal or drums or a guitar. And the band usually comes in around 11 or 12, and we just make noise until 8 o'clock-ish, and then call it a day with a lunch break somewhere in between. If it's a mixed day, it's usually just me in here, and I come in by myself and just get a session going. And I try to take more breaks when I'm doing a mix, just because I feel like ear fatigue is definitely a thing, and it helps to gain perspective by walking away from it multiple times. And it turns out better if it's not like a hurried thing where it has to be due by a certain time, because it allows me to have more time to get away from it and revisit it. So that's my general mix flow. Not too different in terms of the working hours, but the way I approach it is probably a little more segmented. Sometimes I go off-site to other studios to record. I like working at like Sunset Sound, East West. I'm working at Glenwood coming up. Yeah, those are like my go-to. Oh, Capitol's amazing too when I can get in there. So yeah, those are my go-to when I'm doing like a bigger project that requires kind of a bigger room sound, or kind of maybe if we're doing something orchestral or choral, it'll be one of those studios. But yeah, generally I like coming back here and doing overdubs just because I have all my toys kind of set up and ready to go. Tons of guitars and amps and drums and synths and my outboard gear and it's always a little weird when you go to a different studio. The thing that you think of last is the computer, but you hop in a computer and you expect to pull up your plugins and you forget, like, oh yeah, they have a completely different set of tools than I'm used to. I feel pretty comfortable here, and everything is pretty easily accessible and ready to go. The bulk of the record, even if I do go to one of those other studios, the bulk of the record is usually done primarily here. I've been here for like 20 years-ish. No, 15 years. It's kind of undergone a lot of change over the course of that period of time in terms of the construction of it, and the gear has changed pretty much completely 3 or 4 times over. There's always something, when you are chasing that sound or that thing, I just can't help it. I'm never quite satisfied with the sound, and I'm always trying to look for some way to up the game. The gear merry-go-round is kind of constant around here. There's a time when I was buying a lot of, newer boutique gear, and I still have a lot of that stuff. I've kind of come to just appreciate a lot of the classic gear. Hence, I get things like an Elliot. I got an LA2A, LA3A, 2254, 1073s, Pultecs, things like that, which I never really had kind of those bread and butter, audio kind of go-tos. Just kind of have a newfound appreciation for it lately. I love the Grace monitor controller. I think it's the best one out there for my needs. I love the visual aspect of the screen. I think it's just like super helpful to have a decibel meter as well as like a meter for your output level that you're listening. It helps to just come in and know, like, start at 69 dB, and that's like a good starting point for a listening level for any given day, any given project. Certain synths just always sound really good to me, like a Juno 60 and a Mini Moog. Certain guitars just always sound amazing, like a Jazzmaster or a 67 Tele or a 57 Les Paul or a P-Bass. A great P-Bass almost rarely doesn't sound really good compared to other basses. And then Drum World, you can't beat like a classic Keystone Ludwig kit. They just sound amazing always. All those things are, we've heard those sounds so much throughout time on so many different records. It's kind of like ingrained in the fabric of music. It's hard to get away from some of those things to some extent. But I'm also trying to discover new things and new ways of recording and new ways of approaching a mix and new ways of doing things. Like, again, I'm never really quite satisfied. I'm trying to look for a way to up the game some way. And there's so many new interesting technologies coming out, new plugin companies, and even new hardware companies that are doing things that are really interesting. So it never ends, basically. It never ends. For monitoring, I've gone through so many different speakers. Again, currently I have these AML2s, PMCs, which I really, really love. I've had 2 pairs of these now. I didn't like the PMC sound for a time, but I've kind of come around to it. They have a new line that's coming out very soon, 2.6 and a 2.8, that are incredible. That are probably gonna be my next set of speakers. I never start in headphones, but I always finish in headphones. I think it's always good for me to kind of start with what I know and what sounds good to me in my room that I'm so familiar with, which is these speakers in this room. But I do also feel like it's important to monitor and listen the way that people are going to listen to it, you know, at the end of the day, which is streaming an MP3 through earbuds or headphones. Having a great set of headphones with like as much detail as possible, like the Odysseys, just really helps nail those final few elements of my mix, my balances. It helps me identify things that are like maybe popping out too much or not enough. I find I hear a lot of pops and crackles easier on headphones than I do on speakers. You know, if there's like a crossfade missing or something got cut off on the import or something. Identifying some of those problematic things are really helpful with headphones. So I always finish on a set of headphones as a kind of a general rule of thumb. I started playing drums as my first instrument. Well, actually piano is my first instrument, but I quickly kind of abandoned that and switched to drums when I was in high school. I had a bunch of bands local bands I was in. I played in a punk band called FYP in like the early 90s. Probably the biggest band of note that people might know that I played in the late 90s to early 2000s was a ska punk band called Real Big Fish. I toured with them for like a few years. I went to school somewhere in between there. I graduated from UCLA in 98, and then I joined the band, and then I left the band to go to work at Capitol Recording Studios. So I started essentially as a runner, or a setup guy as they called it there. And I was there for a few years, started doing some engineering, at that point had started building out my own studio, which is this place here. Very humble beginnings here, wasn't nearly as kind of like dialed as it is now, but slowly and started accumulating, you know, more gear, more clients, more projects, started engineering for other producers. One of the first guys was a guy named Mark Trombino. It was like a guy I learned a lot from. He did like some of those early Jimmy Eat World records, and Blink-182's Dude Ranch are some of his big, more well-known records that he's done. But I loved a lot of the San Diego bands he had done in the early 90s, like Dry Lake Jehu and Rocket from the Crypt and Tanner. So I learned a lot from him and did a handful of projects with him, did a handful of projects with another producer named Tim Pagnotta, who's a good friend of mine, and then did, for a number of years, worked with a producer named Justin Meldal Johnson, and together he and I worked on everything from Paramore to M83, Wolf Alice. We just did a bunch of projects together. Really amazing musician, great producer, and a good friend who I just learned a lot from. I co-produced a few things with Joe Ciccarelli, who's also a legend and a great talent and a good friend. Yeah, like the last 5 years, I've just been kind of just trying to forge my own path and do more mixing, do more productions on my own, and I've been lucky to have stayed true to that path so far, knock on wood. Fugazi is one of my, if not my favorite band of all time, and back in my day, anything that came out on Discord, I would buy, like by default, you know. And I do still to this day love a lot of the bands that came out of the Washington, D.C., you know, punk scene. And I saw a lot of those bands play live over the years, like Nation of Ulysses and Jawbox, and the sound of those records too, like the fact that Don Zientara and Ian Mackay had this kind of relationship where most of the bands would record at inner ear. It was just like a really cool bubble, you know, of like a scene, you know, and bands that they were recording at that time that were like hugely influential on me. Yeah, I still will put those records on to this day, you know. I admire everything about what Ian Mackay has done and everything that label has done. It's amazing. My daughters are in a band. My oldest daughter, Lucia, is 14, and my youngest is Mila, she's 11. And they're in a band called the Linda Lindas. They're like a punk band who got a record deal with Epitaph and working on their debut LP. They have about 10 songs, 10 original songs that they've been working on. They gained some notoriety by earlier this year. They had like a little viral video of this show they performed at the library that I recorded, which is funny. Like initially that performance was supposed to be just like, you know, audio through a video camera, you know, microphone. And I was like, no, we're not gonna do it that way. I just received this awesome Apollo from UA. I took it down to the library. I brought my mics and stands and cables and everything. I did a proper recording of it, you know, or as best as I could. And it was funny, but it was funny, we never thought, you know, we did the gig, I recorded it, mixed it, thought nothing of it. Thought like, oh, this is a fun, cool gig at the library, you know, this is an unusual one. Yeah, next thing you know, like we wake up one morning and the video's being shared by like Cat Power and Tom Morello and Flea and Aquafina. And like, it was awesome. It was, I've never been a part of a viral moment or anything, but we're also trying to keep them level-headed, you know, like one girl at Mila's school told her, Mila, you're famous. And, you know, I keep telling Mila, you still have to do your homework, you know. You might have 250,000 followers on Instagram, but still got to turn that homework in, you know.